The Edmonton Oilers pulled off an exciting come-from-behind overtime win against the Capitals this weekend. But how good is this team really? Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers is here to talk about that, some 5-on-5 issues, and what to expect at the trade deadline. All that and more next on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Thank you for helping to make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Oilers, Nick Zararis. And Nick, what an exciting game on Saturday against the Washington Capitals. The Oilers tie it in the final minute, win it in overtime. Big games for McDavid and Bouchard. What does an emotional win like that mean to this team?
They've been in a weird place. Last week, Draisaitl's away from the team for a week in Germany dealing with family stuff. They have a very shorthanded lineup for those 3 games. They win 2 of the 3. They come back out Thursday night and get absolutely obliterated. Pittsburgh scores 3 goals in 40 seconds, and that game's over 5 minutes in, and they go through the motions on Thursday night. So I think it's really important for a team that has still yet to win 3 games in a row this year. I'm pretty sure they're the only team in the league that has yet to win 3 in a row at any point this year. It's been a very up and down, inconsistent year where for the first month and a half or so, it was the goaltending. They were getting .875 goaltending. Now, it's been a little bit better with the Ingram and Tristan Jarry pair, but it doesn't feel the way it did last year or the year before that. There is clearly something this group is missing. But wins like Saturday, they're just enough to pull you back in. They're just enough. They didn't play great. The defense was awful. The goaltending wasn't very good. But when you have the high-end power that a Bouchard and McDavid do, where they can tilt the game to that degree, the Kings saw that very well in the playoffs last year in the first round, you can talk yourself into a lot with this group. Anytime you're going to go out there in an end-of-game situation with McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Bouchard, Nugent, Hopkins, that's about as good as it's going to get for a 6-on-5, we need a goal.
The power play right now ranks #1 in the league. It's been lethal, but 5-on-5, it's been more of a struggle. What's going on, and how do you fix that?
So it's really interesting. Last year, the Oilers' underlyings were a lot better at 5-on-5. They scored a lot more, they had a lot more possession, but the power play was 12th. This year, we're seeing their metrics closer to middle of the pack, but the power play has been the best in the league for about a month and a half, 2 months now, and it's stayed there where they're humming about 33, 34%. At even strength, it's complicated because you have to really split the numbers up between before Zach Hyman comes back to the lineup in the middle of November and after that. I think you also need to look at the way they've played when they've had Jack Roslovic in the lineup versus that 12, 13 game stretch where he was out. Because at even strength, the numbers are decent. McDavid's outscoring opponents 49-42. Draisaitl's outscoring opponents 40-8, 38. But when they play together, they're only outscoring opponents 16-14. And then when they're not on the ice, the Oilers have been outscored 55-27 without McDavid or Draisaitl on the ice. Last year, it was 88-66. The year before that, 65-68. So the depth offense hasn't really been there. And it's largely, at least in my estimation, that it's been pieced together. The Oilers this year and last year in particular, they have a lot of pieces who are good individual players. Last year, Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson. This year, you have Ike Howard, you have Matthew Savoy, young guys who don't really have big NHL track records, but are promising. You still have Adam Henry kicking. He'll be back after the Olympic break. You've got Lazar, who's been a nice fourth-line center. Trent Frederick, who has let fewer points on the season than Bouchard had Saturday night, which tells you a lot about how the season has gone. It's a piecemeal together bottom 6, and I think that's going to really bring their deadline decisions into focus. And the idea I've been toying with for last week, and last week when Draisaitl was out, they played Nugent Hopkins at center, and I think ultimately that's going to be your solution this year. I don't think the impact player you want, especially with the Oilers cap situation where it is, where they're going to need to trade Andrew Mangiapane to make any type of roster addition, let alone if they wanted to add a Panarin or an Alex Tuch, a really expensive marquee player, and that's even if guys like Tuch are going to be available because Buffalo's in the mix right now. So they are in a weird spot where their best players are still playing really well. Nuge is having a nice bounce back year. Last year, only like 50, 60 points. This year, he's on a point per game pace. Draisaitl's goal scoring has tapered off this year versus last year, but you kind of expected that. Last year was a crazy shooting year, 50 goals, led the league in goals. All of this is to say, they are still in the thick of it largely because the Pacific isn't very good. They still have a lot of Pacific Division games to go. They haven't played the Sharks yet. They've only played the Ducks once. They've only played the Kings once. There's a lot of work to do, but they have opportunity in front of them in that respect, that even though the division isn't very good, they still have a lot of division games to go, which if you can capitalize on those can make up for the fact, you're losing games to teams like the Penguins and the Devils, who we were talking before we started recording, are okay, at least in regards to the Penguins. But if you're fancy yourself a contender, you're going to beat a Colorado, a Dallas, a Vegas, you got to beat the bad teams. You got to beat the teams you're supposed to. And on paper, Pittsburgh is a team the Oilers are supposed to beat.
You mentioned the goaltending. How has that been since Tristan Jarry was added, and how do you see them? Is there a clear-cut favorite for the playoffs as far as who's going to start?
That's an excellent question. They have been a straight tandem. This is old school one and one. They're alternating back and forth, and I think that's probably the best way to manage this. We talk about this a lot where goalies hit that physical wall at a certain amount of starts. Tristan Jarry, for his career, usually starts about 40 games in a regular season, and when they had acquired him, he had already made about 20 starts for the Penguins. So I think you really are going to manage their respective workloads, him and Connor Ingram. Ingram didn't play hockey much last year, only played through about February, then sat out the rest of the year, was in the AHL when the Oilers had the injury situation to Tristan Jarry pop up. They've largely been okay. They're hovering around 900 save percentages. The goals against are both 2-4, 2-5, so they're doing enough. In terms of quality, the goal saves above expected aren't anything crazy, but we talk about this all the time with the Oilers. If you're asking those guys to win you the game, you have problems. That's not the way this team is designed, and it's not what it's built for. If you only need the goalie to be the 8th or 9th best player on the team, the Oilers will have some chances, and that's largely been their recipe in the postseason. Everybody else does their job, and the goalie just doesn't self-immolate, and they win a lot of games. But this year, at least in the first month or two, it got to the point that they made the trade. Tristan Jarry was free last year. You could have claimed him off of waivers and had him in the building last year. They ultimately didn't do that. They had to trade Skinner, which they didn't really want to do. They wanted to keep Skinner to be the backup to whatever goalie they traded for, but to make the money work and to get Tristan Jarry, you had to send Skinner out. So if I had to handicap it, I would assume Tristan Jarry would be the starter if the playoffs started tomorrow, but you could very easily see Connor Ingram making playoff starts for this team.
We are approaching the Olympic break in just a couple of weeks. You have a roster freeze, then probably a flurry of trades before the Olympic break, and then maybe a handful of games after, and then you have the trade deadline. How will the Oilers approach the trade deadline, and what do you think they're looking to add?
So the reports have been they're looking top 9 forward. I would like them to go get a 7th defenseman as well, just another body, because they don't really have an established 7th D with experience. They have Alec Regula, who's played a lot this year, but has never played in an NHL playoff game. I think that traditional 7th D is important. I think we typically see teams that go on long playoff runs use 9 or 10 defensemen over the course of that, so that would be nice. But they're looking top 9 forward. The reports, they would like a center to keep Nugent Hopkins on the wing, but I think based on the prices we're hearing out there for guys like Trocheck, for Ryan O'Reilly, for Steven Stamkos, I think, and that's even if Nashville, who's on a nice little run themselves, wants to trade guys, which has really been, I think, the biggest issue for a lot of these teams is because nobody really is eliminating themselves, everybody is going to hold tight. And I think we're going to see a pocket of these trades right before, like you said. And then after, teams are going to have to make a decision. Are we really in this, or are we going to do what Doug Armstrong said of, it doesn't matter. If we make the first round, we're going to get killed by Colorado with or without Robert Thomas. So maybe it does benefit us to make a trade now and figure out what our team's going to look like. I would love them to go out and get a first-line caliber player. I don't think that's in the cards just based on the salary situation. They need one more top 9 forward. They can't go into the playoffs with Trent Frederick in the top 9. Ideally, you don't want Adam Henrique in your top 9 either. And if you can have those guys on your 4th line, it's a really expensive 4th line, which you don't want, but they need more guys. It's that simple. They have a lot of individual talent, especially in the bottom 6, but it doesn't really complement each other. The skill sets don't really complement each other all that well. And it's led to this bottom 6 of any given night, anybody could be playing with anyone, which isn't good for anyone because no one's building chemistry. Nobody's figuring out how they need to play with each other. And it's made this very top-heavy lineup even more top-heavy.
Well, it's going to be an interesting next 6 weeks or so. I know you'll have it covered every step of the way. Nick, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can find Locked On Oilers wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. You can find me on pretty much every social media platform as Nick Zararis or Nick Zararis Sports. Thanks for having me, Gil.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that can be. But when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored Jobs boost your posts to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed.